Oh my goodness, that's a great question because you would probably get just a handful of people that would.
At 68, Vince Gill still carries himself like the humble, guitar-slinging poet fans fell in love with decades ago. Vince Gill still walks like the humble guitar-slinging artist that people fell in love with decades ago. But behind the smooth voice and shelves of Grammys is a side of him that most people don't see. The quiet critic, the fierce competitor, the man who's hid his real feelings for decades under decades of country charm. Gill quietly disliked artists who put fame before craft, who broke custom, or who didn't respect the genre he spent his whole life defending. In a recent interview, Vince Gill names these 7 artists. Feel like you know Vince Gill? After this, you'll never listen to their or his music the same way again. Let us begin at the beginning, before the fame and before the fights, because by the end of his list, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about country royalty. Vince Gill grew up in Norman, Oklahoma, which isn't exactly Nashville but close enough to dream. Gill was born into a family that loved music and taught them hard lessons. His father was a federal judge and a part-time singer. He was strict but loving, and Gill learned discipline and how to play the guitar from him. These lessons would shape not only his music, but also who he is as a person. Vince's path to fame was paved with heartbreak. In his early years, he joined bluegrass bands and worked hard at small gigs, sleeping in vans, and taking whatever pay he could scrape together. He learned to survive on talent, grit, and the support of other musicians who saw his rare gift. But when he joined the country rock band Pure Prairie League, his voice caught everyone's attention and didn't stop. In the 1980s and 1990s, he became a mainstay of the country scene, winning 21 Grammys, countless casts, and respect from every part of the industry. He became known as a songwriter who never took shortcuts or followed trends. His guitar was beautiful, and his lyrics were honest. But along with his success came sadness, as Vince saw the music he loved become faster, flashier, and more commercial behind the scenes. Country music was changing, and not always in ways he liked. He saw artists become famous for their looks instead of their skills, and he saw real songs give way to formulas made for the masses. He felt like some acts hadn't earned the awards they were due because they relied on gimmicks, catchphrases, and shock value rather than substance. He sat in award shows and politely applauded while his blood boiled. He saw performers lip-syncing while real musicians were pushed to the background. He saw executives in the industry reward artists who played politics instead of instruments. And worst of all, he saw the heart of country music, honesty, struggle, and he kept his mouth shut for years, but now the mask is off. Vince has never called anyone out until now. Chris Christopherson: Chris, we make it through the night's pretty great, but Lord's great, would you call this guy a great singer? This one shocked even longtime fans, because Vince Gill had been praising the legends and greats who came before him for decades. But behind the scenes, there was one name that Vince avoided at all costs: Chris Christopherson. They were from various places. Chris was the wild poet who was rough and unreliable. He'd show up at parties, slur his way through interviews, and still walk out with the room's respect. Vince, on the other hand, was precise, polished, a technician in the studio, and a perfectionist on stage. He valued technical skill, lyrical structure, and vocal control. And while Vince never openly attacked Christopherson, there was something in the way he dodged his name in interviews, something in the long pauses, something unsaid but felt one story from a CMA rehearsal made the rounds for years when Kristofferson was scheduled to perform. Vince reportedly left early mumbling something about not watching another train wreck on stage. It was never confirmed, but in Nashville stories, like the don't need confirmation to stick privately, Vince was said to be deeply frustrated by the way critics romanticized Kristofferson's messiness, calling it authentic, gritty, and real, while other more skilled performers who practiced relentlessly got passed over. One close friend claimed, Vince once said, "It's not deep, it's just sloppy." We lowered the bar and called it genius. He didn't dislike Christopher's success, but he did dislike how it changed Vince's ideas about what it meant to be great. To Vince, mastering your craft was important, and Chris had skipped that and been rewarded for it. Years went by, and the tension never went away completely. There were no duets, tributes, or collaborations. Even when Vince hosted events honoring other greats from Kristofferson's era, his name was noticeably missing, like a ghost left off the guest list. Now, in a rare moment of honesty, Gill finally added him to the list, not because he wanted to, but because the rift was too big to hide. But if Vince saw Kristofferson as a sign of chaos, the next artist represented something even worse to him. The moment country music sold its soul. It's almost sacrilege to suggest that Vince and Garth Brooks were at odds with each other. If you know the background of country music, you know that Gill and Garth Brooks were two giants in the business. If you pay attention to the little signs, the divide is impossible to miss. Vince was the craftsman, the quiet poet, the guy who would spend hours perfecting a solo or rewriting a verse until it felt like the truth. G brought pyrotechnics, headset mics, and a stadium-sized ego to the genre. He turned country concerts into rock shows, and for some, including Vince, it felt like something holy was being trampled on. It wasn't just the performances, it was the philosophy. Gill liked subtlety, restraint, and melody, while G liked movement and flash scale. While Vince delivered heartbreak with a whisper, G yelled about it in sold-out stadiums. Gill thought of himself as a guardian of the country's roots. He was the one who planned the country's economic revolution, for better or worse. Gill once said that we lost the stories in country music. He never named G directly, but fans connected the dots. Everyone knew who changed the rules and rerouted the river. When G started selling out arenas and dominating award shows, many felt that the soul of country music was fading, and Vince with his sad ballads and guitar solos was being quietly pushed aside. Insiders say Vince was polite in public, but quietly lamented what the genre had become. He reportedly turned down chances to give G Lifetime Achievement Awards, not because he was angry, but because he couldn't fake admiration. It wasn't just a stylistic clash for Vince. Country music wasn't about fireworks or crowd surfing. It was about stories, roots, and humility. Goo, for all his success, embodied a time when those values were lost in the noise of the crowd. Was it jealousy, or just heartbreak seeing a genre change so much? Maybe it was both. Either way, Gill never celebrated Gar's wins. He didn't stand for the standing ovations, and he never sat in the front row next to the mullet-wearing heartthrob who made the country explode for all the wrong reasons. Achy Breaky Heart by Billy Ray Cyrus became a huge hit overnight. It was catchy, went viral before it was cool, and placed country music in the history books of pop culture. But not everyone liked it. The song was said to be insulting to real players in a CMA green room by Gill, whose musical background was in jazz-level complexity, deep songwriting, and traditional country values. Gill was heard joking that Billy Ray's song took country music back 10 years, and it wasn't just a one-time thing. The quote spread like wildfire among people in the business, leading to rumors that Gill saw Billy Ray as a threat to the integrity of the genre to Vince. In the past, country music was about telling stories about pain, hope, and the truth. But then Billy Ray came along with a one-liner hook, a dance craze, and a marketing machine so big it drowned out everything else. It was said that Gill once said the song wasn't country, it was karaoke with a mullet. The two never worked together, shared a stage, or even just walked past each other in the hallway and were said to be rude. While some artists tried to find a balance between new ideas and respect for the roots, Billy Ray looked like he was running the other way. He leaned into the flash, the hair, the hips, and the act. To Vince, it all seemed like a parody of how country music was supposed to be honest, grounded, and based on real life. Gill didn't dislike Billy Ray personally. He didn't need to. But he couldn't stand what Billy Ray stood for, a rise in gimmicky imagery over substance music that started moving Nashville in a direction Gill had spent his whole life fighting. The next artist she sold more albums than almost anyone else in the history of the genre, and Gill couldn't stand the sound of her records. Shania Twain was the queen of country pop to the world. Her meteoric rise was groundbreaking, glamorous, and unstoppable. But to many purists, including Vince Gill, she was a disruptor. Her glossy production, pop-drenched hooks, and huge crossover appeal made little room for the kind of raw, roots-driven music Gill pushed. After her, a wave of artists followed her, chasing the same sleek formula, leaving tradition behind in favor of market-tested melodies and million-dollar music videos, though he never named her by name. Gill said once, "We lost a generation of real country fans chasing radio hits." After that, he said, "We forget what genre we're in sometimes." Longtime fans could easily read between the lines, and while most industry legends eventually met, shared tributes, duets, or at least a stage, Gill and Twain never did during her rise. They never did it at award shows, or even during genre-spanning tributes, where their names would have fit in perfectly as two huge artists in the same lane. The silence wasn't just awkward, it was deafening behind closed doors. Some people close to Vince said that Shania's success was a turning point in Nashville's pursuit of trends over ability, and in the transformation of country music into something other than what it was originally meant to be. Vince went on to define bro country, and then left the company. Then shaking his head, Jason Aldean. Jason Aldean came on the scene with loud, heavy guitars and lyrics that were more about trucks, whiskey, and tailgates than heartbreak and truth. His sound was loud, his brand was bold, and his fan base grew almost overnight. But not everyone in Nashville liked him. Vince Gill, on the other hand, has always pushed songwriting as an art form and storytelling as soul. He also didn't hide the fact that he didn't like the bro country trend. "I think we've dumbed it down," he told Rolling Stone. "There's room for fun and music, but let's not pretend it's country just because there's a pickup truck in the video." That wasn't just a thought. It was a direct message to Gill. Aldean's rise was another break from the ideals he fought to protect in loud production. Gill never thought that country music stood for shallow lyrics and what he called lifestyle marketing over lived experience. Even though both Aldean and Gill have performed at major country festivals, they've never been on the same bill, and sources say that Gill has politely declined to host or attend any event where Aldine was the main act. Gill couldn't bring himself to support what Aldine stood for. The distance wasn't just a matter of style, it was a philosophical one. One built his legacy on substance, the other on spectacle. But if Aldine was too loud for Gill, the next guy might have been too loud for the whole world. Kanye West. This may sound crazy, but hear us out. Gill never mentioned Kanye West by name, but he has made it very clear in many interviews that he thinks the ego in modern music is killing artists who put fame over craft, spectacle over content. If that sounds like something that happened in 2016, it's because it did. In an interview, Gill said, "I see young artists walk into a room and expect the world to bow down. In my day, you earned respect by listening first." When asked if he was talking about a specific person, Gill smiled and said, "Nothing." It's also worth noting that the quote was published in the same month as the event. During a now famous rant, Kanye said he was the best artist of all time. The media went crazy with rumors, and fans said they could read between the lines and figure out who Vince meant to Gill. Music is holy. It's about humility, service, and sincerity. It's not about taking over award shows or demanding attention all the time, and Kanye, whether on purpose or not, became the personification of everything Vince seemed to stand against: chaos over control, self-worship over soul. They've never met and never needed to, because for Vince, this wasn't about genre, it was about values. Now you know the 7 names. Vince Gill couldn't stand it when legends, pop stars, and genre-bending risk-takers disagreed with him in public or privately. These weren't small disagreements. They were deep cracks in the soul of country music when Vince chose quiet over support, honor over popularity.